Astonishing Legends Network.
Thanks to our sponsors and Patreon supporters, Astonishing Legends is free to listen to. We appreciate your support of them and us.
Most legends start with the occurrence of something strange and unusual. Many of those stories that have happened in more recent times are a little easy to speculate on because they may have the benefits of being observed by modern science and technology. In today's day and age, the unexplained has a much more difficult time staying out of sight. In theory, institutions are good at solving the mysteries that take place within their walls. Hospitals, coroner's offices, state health departments. They're built around the premise that things can be named, categorized, and filed. And when something comes along that won't cooperate with that premise, the pressure to name it anyway, and do it quickly, is significant. On the night of February 19, 1994, in an emergency room in Riverside, California, something happened that nobody in that particular institution had a name for. It started with a smell. Two smells, actually. One fruity, biological, strange, and one sharp, and similar to ammonia, like the inside of a cleaning supply closet. Both coming from the same afflicted person. Then there was a visual anomaly, a shimmering, oily film coating that same person's skin that had no clinical explanation. When a blood draw was taken and the nurse held the syringe up to the light, she saw particles suspended in the blood that blood shouldn't produce. Crystalline, yellow-brown, just sitting in the clear plastic cylinder like they belonged there. Within 4 minutes, 23 people in the ER reported symptoms. A respiratory therapist who passed out couldn't control her own limbs when she awoke. A medical resident wound up spending 2 weeks in the ICU, requiring surgeries on her knees for years afterwards. Staff members on the ER floor, retching, burning, and struggling to breathe. The emergency room had to be evacuated mid-procedure. The people who stayed behind to finish the resuscitation put on HAZMAT suits just to remain in there. The poor patient at the center of it died that night, surrounded by confusion. What followed, the autopsies and pressurized rooms, the national laboratory brought in to analyze the chemistry, the victim's body held in official custody for 10 weeks, the lawsuit, the settlement, and in at least one case, the silence. All of it was the sound of institutions doing what institutions do, reaching for the nearest available explanation, closing what could be closed, and paying what needed to be paid to make it all go away. But that patient was a person. Her name was Gloria Ramirez, just 31 years old, a mother of two, who had been fighting a disease that had already taken most of what it could take before she ever got to the ER that night. Yes, she was terminally ill, but no one deserves to go through what she did, or the stigma attached to it. Her story is more than the label it ended up with, and most importantly, it's not by any stretch mystery solved.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
We agreed to settle in part to avoid stirring up allegations about safety hazards at the hospital. Peter Ozanoff, attorney for Riverside County, on the $350,000 settlement of the Ramirez family lawsuit, March 25, 1998.
Join us tonight for a look at the startling 1994 emergency room death of Gloria Ramirez.
And we're back.
Well, that we are, folks, and it's good to be back. Man, May is jam-packed for us. A lot of shows.
Yeah, there's a lot. We're putting out a lot of new content this month.
That's right. 3 new main shows of Astonishing Legends in a row here. This is the first of those. And, of course, the weekly Dead Letter offices, too. So that's 7 new shows this month.
Yeah, we'll be in a state, catatonic
comatose?
or or perhaps a fugue state. I'm going to get us on the latter.
It's a lot of work, but it's also fun. We got a lot of really great dead letters coming down the pike. You guys are sending more and more of those in. That's awesome. They're getting longer and more detailed, which is a lot of fun. So, which brings me to my next point, by the way. In the summers, we lighten our schedule just a touch so we can spend some time with our families and catch our breath and pay giant stacks of bills, which is why we've got the big ramp up now. For June, July, and August, we do one new main show per month just for those 3 months.
But the dead letter office will still be weekly as always.
Yes, it will. All right, so let's switch gears here and get into Gloria Ramirez's story.
Okay, to start us off, a thought on this. Now, some of you may remember, I certainly don't know which episode, but we talked about this case before.
Yeah.
Maybe with the Somerton man, I think, just because of the weird chemical nature. Was that the one?
I think it was. I feel like I looked it up in our transcripts because I was curious too when I went to get the date, and I'm pretty sure it was the Somerton episode. I think it was like the part 3 of the Somerton man series.
Yeah, it could be. But I will tell you, and as I think I said then, was that this story was in my brain bank vault, the tape vault, Scott and I have, of curiosities, because I remember being in LA and reading all about this because it fascinated me when it hit the news.
Yeah.
And of course, the TV blurbs were short, but it was covered because it was so strange. And then I dove in, and I used to get the LA Times back then and actually read it. And then I was just following everything they could because it was just like, wait, what happened? That's just so weird. I want answers with this. You know, of course, decades before we started thinking about doing a show about these types of oddities that happened. But I was fascinated by this and also frustrated that there were no more answers at the time. And of course, you know, back as it is now, stuff gets passed over the news cycle. It's like, wait, what about that other thing that happened 2 weeks ago? That unfortunate tragedy with Gloria Ramirez.
What about all those drones in New Jersey that suddenly no one is talking about anymore? What was going on there for months
did you hear?
And months?
Those are just regular, normal FAA routine, whatever they do. Yeah, so don't worry about it. Yeah.
I don't know.
Things the size of school buses flying through the air. It's nothing to worry about. I'm sure it's ours.
Yeah.
Or is it just possibly what Jeremy Corbell has related to us in Instagram, passage material, which is a story passed down for you to add to the narrative unwillingly, or if you don't know what you're talking about, but people do.
The skies look like that 1561 wood cutting from Nuremberg, and everybody's just oh, now it's over.
Right, just
okay,
giant crosses and arrows and colored dots in the sky. It's all fun. But yeah, that's the idea that don't worry about it. It's just our own tech. It's just secret. So move on. Anyway, was it 2014? You and I started more officially talking about this story. And, you know, that happened 20 years before we started the show even. And so that would be 1994, 32 years ago. Could you believe that? Yeah.
And it's, to me, I mean, this story seems like it's been around a minute, but 32 years is crazy.
Yeah.
I just can't believe it. Honestly.
Yeah.
It occurred to me that my 1990 300ZX twin turbo, which I still have and think of fondly, is 36.
Wow.
That car is 36. And I still think of it as being kind of modern.
It should have its own kids in high school and a mortgage to pay. Yeah.
I know. It's like, I need to get antique plates for it. But anyway. I got married in 94.
Oh, that's
so I've been married basically since this happened.
Now, let me ask you, were you in LA? Now, I know you got married, I think, in North Carolina, right?
We got married in North Carolina, but we had been living in LA for a year. So we were probably in LA when this happened.
Do you remember this story?
I do, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was in the news and I remember it. And, you know, of course, in my mind, I was like 3 years old then. If it's how I feel compared to how I am now. My wife and I were very young and, you know, trying to make our way in the world in Los Angeles. It was a wild time. So I think it was just one of those things, just like, wow, look at this weird big city news story.
I remember back then, it's like, man, I wish there was some way, and that was the nascent internet too, of getting back to this and following more. I'm looking for a rabbit hole, and there just wasn't any until it was presented to you in, you know, newspaper media, or more so newspapers, because unless something big happened with it, you wouldn't see it make the TV news. Right. But in any case, it's a lot has happened, but that one's always stuck with me, partly because of the tragedy of it. Just like, as we said in the cold open, it's like, man, what a weird, awful way to go out. But also the things that you learn happen to the medical providers on there, like, that's also awful to have to live with.
Yeah.
And lasting. So that stuck with me.
Yeah, and one of the things we wanted to point out here is that there's a human being at the center of this story, and that's Gloria Ramirez.
Yeah.
And we aim to stay respectful of her, her passing, which is no doubt still very painful for her surviving family members. A lot of people have covered this over the years. Obviously, these shows have been around a long time. And that's one of the reasons that we didn't title it The Toxic Lady. It's not fair,
Yeah,
and it's
well-
nothing against the other sensationalist shows out there that are doing that and trying to get that SEO. We just don't feel like that's a fair thing to do
Right.
when you're talking about something like this. And, her family's still out there. And
Yeah.
I imagine they're probably avoiding things like what we're about to do here tonight. But if they do hear it, we want them to know that we're trying to be respectful of what happened to her and her situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And words and phrases do migrate over time. And so toxic means slightly different than, of course,
Yeah.
now these days,
Yeah.
more of a social, psychological state of mind or something. But then it's literally toxic, and we're talking about something chemical or other.
Right.
Yeah, the idea though is that, I think people's stories, especially when you're struggling to get news out there, I would hope that family and friends would appreciate keeping her story alive in a way, and that not just
Yeah.
like, oh, that was weird and you forget about it, that she went through an ordeal and what did go on, and take another look at it. So there you go. Like we were saying,
Yeah.
now you have the insight of better forensics, better science and technologies. I don't know if this will be ever looked at again, but something did go on that was really outside the norm. So, this case is really perplexing, and there's a lot of sources out there that seem to be putting it in the mystery solved category, which is everything.
Yeah.
So everything's, if
Yeah.
you've noticed, everything's mystery solved. There's nothing to it. But there's some real debate about that, and you're going to find out about that tonight. So let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with the one we were just talking about at the center of tonight's story. Her name was Gloria Cecilia Ramirez.
Yes, well, Gloria was born in January of 1963 in Riverside, California. And Riverside is about 60 miles east of Los Angeles in what's known as the Inland Empire, which is basically a part of greater Los Angeles area. But get this, it's bigger than 9 of our smaller U.S. states combined, including New Jersey and Hawaii. And if you ever lived in Southern California, you know all about it. It's an interesting place. A lot of people I know live out there, especially, when the housing got so expensive. A lot of coworkers you could still afford a house there in the late 90s and, in the early 2000s to 2010s. And you'd have to make a drive into LA to go to work, especially on these production projects. And it might take you 2 hours, especially. So folks I know left really early in the morning to commute in and then just left early during the day. But yeah, it was a place where a young family could still afford a house. So a lot of people live out there, but it is a lot of warehouses, mid-size industry, tract housing. It had a bit of a boom after the war. It's just below San Bernardino. Riverside is San Bernardino, also a great area there. San Bernardino nearby is just a little bit below Riverside, and to the right is March Air Reserve Base.
Okay.
Don't know how that ties in, but some strange stuff has happened out of March, or sometimes it's mentioned in some lore. So that's always interesting. But my first connection to anything strange or out of the ordinary with Riverside is that when I was at USC and writing for the USC Daily Trojan, the newsroom, you had a bunch of really interesting people, very smart and gifted and fun friends. Rich Haddam's wife, Susan Lambert Haddam, worked there as the editor of the hard news, folks. I was the soft, goofy news. But one of the reporters there, I remember talking to him, Robert Moran, who's I considered a friend, but he was the closest thing I knew to a Carl Kolchak because he loved these kind of weird stories and following up on them. He did not travel out in the dead of night wearing a pork pie hat, but he did try to get to the bottom of this. And one weird story that he had covered from Riverside, and I can't remember if he grew up there and that was his familiarity with it, but he was telling us that he was following up on the story of this really strange, really dense cloud of some kind of miasma of just, I don't know if it was toxic, but just people were freaked out by it. Not fog, because it was rolling down the street in Riverside and huge, but seemed to have a life of its own is kind of, I remember him talking about it.
Okay.
And
Wow.
people just reported it. And then what do you do with it? Well, it just went away. What was that? We don't know.
Right.
So some odd things happened there. But Robert ended up working for the Philadelphia Inquirer since
cool.
1992. So yeah, I haven't
right.
talked to him, but I would love to reconnect because I know he likes to hunt down these weird, wild stories. So there you go.
That's very cool. Well, coming back to Gloria, as we said in the cold open, she was a mother of two. And in the months leading up to this night, when this story started in 1994, she'd been in the middle of a losing fight with late stage cervical cancer. In this particular case, it had already spread to her liver and her kidneys. She had been dealing with it for quite a while, but it was definitely a terminal condition.
Yeah, and anyone who's dealt with cancer or has had loved ones who dealt with it and family and friends, you know that it's a really pitched battle and it takes a real toll on your body, but just physically with appearance too. You can see it ravages you.
Yeah. And there's a couple of details we need to plant here at the beginning of her story because we won't come back to this until later. But when the Ramirez family eventually filed their lawsuit against Riverside County, it contained two separate allegations. The first was about how Gloria was treated on the night she died.
Right. And the second was something that actually predates all of it. The family alleged that back in 1991, the hospital had failed to notify her that a pap smear had returned results indicating she was developing cancer. Now, that's an allegation, and as far as we can tell, not a proven claim. But if there's merit to that, what it means is that 3 years before that night in February, if she had looked further into those alleged results, she would have had a real chance at fighting it on different terms, getting ahead of it, because we know also to getting it detected early is half the battle.
Well, by February of 1994, her condition had reached a stage where her body was running out of ways to fight it and deal with the horrendous side effects of treatment. Her nausea was constant, but on the evening of the 19th, something tipped into new territory, not only for her, but for pretty much everyone she came in contact with that evening.
Right. And speaking of that evening, taking a look at that night, Gloria had been sick all day with nausea and vomiting the entire time. And for someone in her condition, bad days weren't rare. There's good and bad days, but a lot of bad days that come with that. And, but that evening, something had crossed a line. It was different. She was having severe heart palpitations. Confusion was setting in, and her breathing became shallow. Now, her boyfriend, Johnny Estrada, knew that this was more than just, the usual horrible symptoms she'd already been dealing with. So he called 911.
Yeah, he could tell something different was going on. So the paramedics arrived. She's semi-conscious, sluggish, and she's exhibiting what's called Cheyne-Stokes respiration, which is worth explaining because it tells you where things stand. It's a clinically recognized breathing pattern. The breaths come in gradually deepening waves. They build to a peak, and then they fade out into a complete period of apnea, meaning she stops breathing before the cycle starts over. This is not sleep apnea.
Right.
That's when you stop breathing while you're sleeping. This is like loss of an ability to breathe while you're awake.
Yeah, and I'm actually fairly familiar with this because it's fairly common for folks undergoing hospice care. And in the final stages called the active dying phase. So I did read up about this a couple of years
ago. Active, ACTIV, not act of dying.
Yes. Right. So you're in the final phases and it kind of comes on. And so a little bit of a story about that, because again, it's such a common thing and people should know about this, I believe. Cheyne-Stokes shows up in a context of severe neurological compromise or when your body's undergoing systemic metabolic failure. So, when a paramedic sees it, they knows what it means to, about the timeline they're working with. It's probably pretty shortened. And this pattern occurs because the body's internal systems, which means your brain stems control over the breathing, they begin to slow down and weaken as death approaches. And it's often signs that the patient's in an active dying phase. So it could be minutes, could be hours, could be a few days away, could be a couple of weeks. Now, I want to make this note because, again, a lot of folks with elderly loved ones in the hospital coming into contact with this, and it can be pretty unnerving and unsettling and disturbing to witness. But the patients are actually usually unconscious when this happens, and though it's really hard to watch and witness, they're not usually in discomfort. It's just a cycle that happens when the body starts shutting down.
Right. So Gloria's having similar problems here, similar issues, breathing, all this other stuff is going on. They get supplemental oxygen onto her. They work on her for the entire ride to the hospital inside a small enclosed space in the ambulance, which we're pointing out because it plays into later speculation about what was happening with her. She arrived at Riverside General Hospital at approximately 8:15 that night.
And as for the paramedics who brought her in, none of them reported a single symptom that night for them.
Yeah.
Right. So they had more sustained direct proximity to her than almost anyone who came in after that. Because, yeah, as Scott was saying, you're in a tight enclosed space with moderate ventilation, you could say. You know, we sometimes talk about keeping notes on some of these more complex stories we cover. And if you're following along, keep that in mind.
Yes.
So as I just said, she arrived at 8:15 p.m. The ER team, which I know might be called something different for folks in other countries, that's emergency room, but also watching the pit, some hospitals call it the ED, the emergency department.
That's right.
So anyway, they, as you know, from any medical show or your own experience, they jump in right away. And then for a stretch of this, it looks serious, but they launch into one of their standard resuscitation efforts. So they know what to do.
Yeah. And like you said, everybody's watching the pit these days. So one thing that show is super great at conveying is how ingrained the courses of action are that these folks take when specific patients come in with specific conditions.
Right.
So when they see Miss Ramirez, they're theoretically undertaking the standard protocols, standard drugs for someone in her scenario.
Right. And so there's a course of meds that they will use. And usually that would be like high dose benzodiazepines.
Yes.
And so that's the overall umbrella. Could be drugs like diazepam, midazolam, lorazepam, and then any of those antiarrhythmic agents like lidocaine or beryllium. But none of those seem to be helping.
Yeah, her heart was not stabilizing. Her vitals were not getting back under control, which according to the reports is consistent with how compromised her system already was. Failing kidneys alter how drugs move through the body.
Right.
But supposedly then things start happening that can't be connected to any clinical training any of these folks have had before.
Yeah, nothing that can be explained with average organ failure.
Exactly. So while the ER staff are preparing her for defibrillation, someone notices a kind of sheen on her torso.
It's a good catch. There's an oily, shimmering like coating that's on her skin that multiple witnesses thought probably looked like some kind of a topical ointment, some substance that hadn't yet been absorbed. And it wasn't sweat. It wasn't really anything that they'd applied during the treatment.
Yep. And then on top of that, there was a smell, an odor coming from her mouth that they described as both fruity and garlic-like.
Yeah.
And this was so distinct that it registered independently with multiple people in the room before anyone actually said anything about it out loud. That's what they determined later when they were trying to deconstruct this series of events.
Right.
They were like, no, we all noticed that, even though nobody had talked about it yet.
So remember the last time when I told you how my dad was good at negotiating car buying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that faded a little as he got older. And I remember the last car my folks bought. It was an '02 Pontiac Aztek.
Oh, wait, an Aztek? That's Walter White's car. Yeah, for Breaking Bad.
Indeed, it was. Until he bought a 2012 Chrysler 300 SRT8 for himself and an '09 Dodge Challenger for Walt Jr. Anyway, well, the Aztek is actually a pretty good little car, except that Dad paid $10,000 for it, and I think his actual value was $3,200 if it was mint.
Ooh, but you know what though? If you guys still have it, you're getting your money's worth out of it. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, sometimes that's a sales tactic that's used if a dealership isn't moving a car off the lot. You know, they put a high price on it and see if anyone bites. It's a little like George Costanza getting more attention from women after they learned he was dating a model. You know, you want to know what's so special about him or a car for that matter. Now, look, I don't have a problem with dealerships trying to make as much money off you as they can. That's why they're in business. But it's also the buyer's responsibility to save themselves as much money as they can. I just wish Car Gurus was around when my folks bought theirs.
Dang, man, I know. Well, fortunately, Car Gurus is around right now for anyone considering buying or selling a car because Car Gurus puts all the car buying tools you need right at your fingertips. So you can navigate any car lot with confidence, especially when the Car Gurus app is in dealership mode. You can get real-time price drop alerts, transparent, unbiased deal ratings, the vehicle's history, and with all that, plus Car Gurus having the most inventory, you'll never have to wonder or worry about whether you're getting the best deal possible. You'll rest easy knowing that you did.
Yeah, and since Car Gurus has the biggest selection of cars with more than 4 million listings, they make it easier than ever to find the right car and the right deal. And what's super helpful is that dealership mode will let you estimate your final cost before you put pen to paper.
Look, folks, it's no wonder Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site according to SimilarWeb's estimated traffic data.
Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com.
Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal.
That's cargurus.com.
Cargurus.com. You know what, man? I kind of enjoyed you telling us about the legend of Snooper, that cat, in our last Smalls commercial. You got any more good cat stories?
Okay, so back in college at UW, I was in the Acacia fraternity, and one of the brothers adopted a stray kitty, and he was super friendly and enjoyed all the attention. But since we were college kids and had no money, the guy who adopted him was feeding him the cheapest cat food he could find, thinking it was probably just as good as anything else. I think back then it was like 19 cents a can. All right, now generally I am greatly repulsed by the stench of cat pee and poo, but what came out of that cat was supernaturally vile and beyond the pale. We lived in an old house that was the annex for the main house, and one time a sorority came over for a party. The stench that wafted up from his litter box in the basement permeated the house, and the girls were like, "Oh my God, what is that?" Well, after that major party fell and the poor little guy's continuing turd trauma, the fellas all started chipping in to buy him better food. Still smelly, but less so. Man, how I wish we had Smalls back then.
Oh, yeah. Smalls helps with digestion and therefore leavings, because more of the nutrients in Smalls food are digestible, and that means less junk coming out the tail end, which leads to less smelly poo-poos. I'm sure a lot of cat owners just get used to the really foul bowels and think, well, that's just the way it is. But with Smalls, it doesn't have to be.
No, it does not. And by the way, we all know that goes for humans too. You can tell when someone isn't eating right. But you can make sure your furry child is eating right because Smalls is fresh, gently cooked food made without preservatives. And a balanced diet with Smalls means less shedding, less scarf and barf, fewer hairballs, and even getting that silky, shiny, glowed-up coat back.
Yep, and the reasons for the big stink are that most cat food, even some of the ones with big brand names, are made with cheap fillers like grains, artificial ingredients, meat byproducts, all the stuff that ain't great for cats, let alone humans. And obviously, the big pet food companies add all that crap because it's cheaper to make. But their savings translate into poorer health for your kitties.
Yeah, meat is easier for cats to digest, and the high protein you get with Smalls equals improved hydration, with stronger bones and better muscle tone. It's really what nature intended. And when their bodies absorb more nutrients, that means they have more energy and a healthier, better life. And you won't have your house guests wrinkling their noses.
Don't just take our word for it, because after switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements. And if commitment makes you a skittish kitty, you can try Smalls risk-free, which means they'll refund you if your cat won't eat their food. But we're betting they're going to love it.
Yeah, so stop serving your little carnivore a bowl of processed shortcuts. For a limited time, because you're an Astonishing Legends listener, get 60% off your first order, plus free shipping and free treats for life when you head to smalls.com/AL.
That's 60% off your first order, plus free shipping and free treats for life when you head to smalls.com/AL.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn, and you're listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now, back to the show.
All right, well, let's take a step back here for a second. There are two separate, I guess you can call them physical anomalies. One that they can see and one they can smell. And this is before anyone's drawn any blood or done any blood work. Second note for the notebook.
Yes, for people trying to keep up with everything that's going on here. Enter registered nurse Susan Kane. She draws Gloria's blood for a routine chemistry panel. She moves the syringe away from her arm, and the odor that comes off the blood sample stops her. She said it was a sharp, pungent, and ammonia-like smell. And she actually said something about it out loud at that point.
Yeah, and Dr. Julie Gorchinsky, who was a medical resident working in the room that night, looks at that syringe, and what she sees, inside, they're not air bubbles or any kind of particulates from some kind of contaminated draw. These are crystalline particles, and they're manila colored, kind of a yellowish brown, and they're suspended in the blood itself. Now, normally blood doesn't crystallize in a syringe sitting at room temperature.
Yeah. And so this is the beginning of a series of insane cascading events. This is where things get crazy. Nurse Kane then reports a burning sensation on her face and then proceeds to pass out.
Right. And then Dr. Gorchinsky collapses and she goes into convulsions and starts having difficulty breathing. And from that, she'll end up spending 2 weeks in the ICU. Now, I will say I've talked to medical professionals, and sometimes they do see odd things in a vial of drawn blood.
Right.
Yeah, I won't get into it, but just like they can tell, like, okay, that's not normal.
Something's
in there.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So on top of this, Nurse Kane is down, Dr.
Right.
Gorchinsky collapsed, Maureen Welch, the respiratory therapist who'd been bagging Miss Ramirez, faints next. And when she comes to, she can't get her arms and legs to do what her brain is telling them to do. It's not, yeah. So it's just like, oof.
Yeah, I mean, that's very scary for the experiencer. And I'm sure now starting to look very scary for the whole provider team here. But
Yeah.
is this considered paralysis, or what is this condition you could explain here?
Well, it's not clear if she was paralyzed. They don't use that word in the reports, but
Right.
the reports on all this are kind of vague. So
Mhm.
I feel like we should leave it at her not being able to move them the way she wanted them
Yeah.
to, yet maybe they're moving a little on their own or spasming, I suppose. But to be clear, that's conjecture based on the info we have. We couldn't get more specific information there.
Yeah, there's some gaps here. And of course, we're not allowed to see detailed medical records, but leave it to suffice that it's something serious that she's experiencing here.
Yes.
Yeah, and then now Welch is not the last person to start having issues because Sally Balderas, a vocational nurse assisting everyone else on the team, she starts retching and her skin starts burning, or the sensation of burning.
Yeah.
She wound up being hospitalized for 10 days, having difficulty breathing on her own. So now in total, 23 staff members will report symptoms before this night is over.
In the sequence of events here, all three physical anomalies on Gloria's body were before the first person collapsed. So that's the sheen on her skin. That was there before. The smells were there before. And the crystals in the syringe were noted before Dr. Gorchinsky hit the floor.
Right. I think the order of events is important here because the strangeness in that room preceded the fear of whatever was going on. That is important to keep in mind here. We're talking about chemical events versus psychological ones. So again, keep that in mind.
Now, Dr. Gorchinsky's case in particular is worth pausing on for a second because in addition to the convulsions and the breathing difficulty she's having, she spent 2 weeks in the ICU, like we said. In the ICU, she developed hepatitis, pancreatitis, and avascular necrosis in both knees, which, of course, we had to look up, but that is the death of bone tissue caused by the disruption of blood supply.
Yep, also familiar with that for family issues here. But so, the necrosis, of course, we figured that out. But yeah, vascular, which is like a failure happening that is not able to be reversed. She wound up needing crutches and also requiring surgeries. And eventually, she files a $6 million lawsuit against the hospital.
Yeah, so a lot of things got really sideways for Dr. Gorchinsky, which makes sense when you think about the lawsuit. It's like, what's happening here? So many things got messed up, and it's like, who's at fault? What happened? Why is she developing all these conditions, which is horrible? You know, after 10 years of med school, get into an ER and you're trying to help people, and then this happens to you.
And so now there's a rapidly developing pattern here, and of course, there's procedures for that when it's unknown. Because now you have people passing out, they're being taken to the ICU, the intensive care unit. People are throwing up, they can't breathe. So now the decision gets made to evacuate the entire emergency department. And it's not really orderly, it's chaotic. The room is becoming a hazard in real time, very quickly. But the staff who can leave, who are not essential, they do leave.
But Gloria is still in there, of course, still in cardiac arrest, still needing CPR. A secondary trauma team stays behind to keep working on her, but they have to put on those hazmat suits we were talking about to do it. Full PPE to get close enough to safely continue the resuscitation, and not just like high-level PPE, not just like, oh, I'm going to get a virus here, more like contagion situation.
Yeah, not the paper isolation gowns.
You got to be ready for anything in an ER, and they obviously have hazmat training, but when are you expecting to actually need that? Unless they hear about some sort of chemical accident in town, or maybe a terror attack has happened, as opposed to just a patient just coming in with her own issues that evolves into a need for that. This is really out of left field for them.
Right. Well, think of unpleasant memories about the COVID pandemic and people coming into the ER and the suits they had to put on for that, and not knowing exactly what they're dealing with at that time. You know, these are folks that are used to helping people under this type of duress, folks with medical emergencies. But then in addition to being trained to do that, they expect to be able to assist people. You got to still help others and keep yourself alive. So at some point in all the chaos, this is about 45 minutes after she'd arrived, the remaining team, now they're still in their hazmat suits and they're still working on her. Gloria Cecilia Ramirez, 31 years old, mother of 2, who'd fought her way all through months of terminal illness to get to that hospital in that moment, she died.
Yeah. And the paramedics who brought her in, who'd spent more time with her in a much smaller, more confined space, like we said, with no protective gear on, didn't report a single symptom. So in theory, whatever happened in the ER would be difficult to connect with the ambulance ride because all those people were fine. So something changed between the transportation and getting into the emergency room, or something in the emergency department caused this to happen and was already present when Gloria got there.
Right. Now, I will say I have heard of cases, my fire captain friend has said paramedics did get sick in an ambulance because they responded to a call, picked up this poor young guy who sadly had tried to take his own life by ingesting a lot of ant poison, and it was now coming out of his skin.
Oh, wow.
And producing toxic fumes. And they didn't expect that. And of course, they were fine, I think, but it did make them sick initially because it's just like, you're now like an aromatherapy infuser, you know, it's coming out of your pores. But the next thing that happens, obviously in this case here, is that there should be an autopsy. But after the way this all unfolded, the coroner's office is treating the procedure itself is possibly a potential exposure event.
Yeah, at this point, they're stopping everything down and trying to figure out how to move to the next step because of all the danger and the risk and not knowing where it came from or how to control it or when it's over. So the examination is performed in a specially pressurized, airtight room. The pathologists and their assistants, all in full hazmat moon suits with respirators, like the whole 9 yards. They collect tissue samples, fluid samples. They test the air that had been sealed inside Gloria's body bag since the night of the incident. Every precaution available around an autopsy procedure is in place for this.
Yeah, because they don't know what they're dealing with. And so far, no one can figure out what happened. Even the investigators are afraid of Ms. Ramirez's body at this point.
Yeah, and after all that, the pressurized room, suits, everything, the air samples from the body bag, the official autopsy doesn't solve anything. No toxic, volatile, or hazardous vapors were found in her tissue samples, and there was nothing unusual in the air that was in the body bag with her.
Right, which is important to note. But there is one additional detail, because during the procedure, they smell something similar to ammonia. Right. And this is the same odor the emergency room staff reported coming off the blood syringe the night she died. And this is documented in the autopsy, but it doesn't lead anywhere definitively. Now, I will say how potent ammonia can be. One of my bosses at a work-study job at University of Washington, he was the campus photographer, Joe Freeman. I'm giving a shout out to him. But he was telling me he worked in a lab, and we were talking about photographic chemicals and stuff. He said, well, you got to be careful with some stuff. Not that it's that toxic in a photo lab, but like he worked at a lab, and there was a hose coming out from some tank, and he didn't know what to do, and he didn't follow procedure, so he, without thinking, just grabbed the hose and sniffed the end of the hose.
Oh.
And you're not thinking about it. It's like, hey, what's in that? What's this lead to? And he instantly blacked out. fell on the
Oh my
floor,
God.
just passed out.
Oh, geez.
And what he later determined was like, yeah, that was like raw, pure ammonia.
Oh my God. Yeah.
The hose, it was so potent. Usually, smelling salts, as they call them, ammonia inhalers, will has amazing properties. It'll revive you. I've been on
Right.
long road trips where you start to get groggy, and you pop one of those, and that's why your head clears. It's
Yeah.
funny how that works. Also great for nausea.
Right.
It'll sort that out. Now you see that's why they give boxers who've been punched out. Also, just a quick note, because it's funny. My friend, the fire captain, they were checking on a very large fellow who he had a drinking thing going on, but he'd routinely pass out. And they said, oh, it's old so-and-so. And so they put a ammonia inhaler near his nose. He immediately revives and then bites or grabs onto the ammonia inhaler with his mouth and chews it up and swallows it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was that
Okay.
he was that out of it.
Jeez.
But it
Yeah.
revived him, and they're like, "Oh my God!" It's just like, get away from his, keep your hands and feet away from his mouth. Anyway, so that's the properties of that. But what Joe said, just for you should know, is that you wave your hand over a source of some potentially toxic fume to get it to kind of waft over to you. You don't smell it directly because it was
Right.
ammonia. And he said, "Yeah, I instantly blacked out."
Well, whatever was producing that smell with Gloria's body survived the night, survived transport, survived being sealed in the body bag. But the pathologists in their gear still couldn't tell us what it was.
Yeah, but the official ruling is cardiac dysrhythmia, this having resulted from kidney failure related to her cervical cancer.
Right. So basically, her heart stopped and her kidneys were failing. But that ruling says nothing about what 23 people inhaled in the emergency department. Nothing about the sheen, the crystals, the smells. And then there's this. Dan Cupido, who held the title of chief deputy coroner at the time, initially stated on record that Gloria Ramirez had not died of natural causes.
Mm-hmm.
But then he reversed that position. And there's no explanation anywhere that we can find in any of the research that we trust about why he did that. And I don't think he's ever said either.
No, other than to me, it doesn't make any sense. But it's a big unanswered question, obviously.
Yeah. While all of this is unfolding, the investigation, the autopsy, the national attention that the case is starting to generate, one of the people working on it is the coroner's investigator, Stephanie Albright.
Right. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, you've watched Quincy if you're our age. So you know what...
Even I barely remember Quincy.
Come on. Jack Klugman. Great show.
I know. Yes, I know.
But yeah, it's just...
It was.
No, it's because it's a fascinating angle because you're like a bit of a detective.
Yes.
It's not the same as being a pathologist or medical examiner, right? The ME.
Right.
They're not necessarily the ones performing the autopsies.
A coroner's investigator is more like the person who manages the human circumstances around a death investigation. Right. They go to the scene, they talk to the families, they coordinate the paperwork, the chain of custody, the process of moving the case through the system. These also are the folks that are sitting across from grieving people and asking like really hard questions.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's when these people are having the worst days of their lives and they're trying to make sense out of what could have happened in this scenario.
Yeah. And I know from my experiences that, if something happens with a patient or person, it's like, if it's anything unusual, like I said, natural causes, they just expire peacefully usually, or there's a known condition. But like if you fall out of bed, you hit your head, there's an accident. They have to know, okay, what happened here? Who's responsible for that? Is it the hospital? Did the patient do it? What's going on? So they gather details like that. And Stephanie Albright had been doing her job since 1986 and being based in Riverside County, which means by 1994, she'd been working inside some of the most difficult and unusual cases that county had seen. And let me tell you, Scott and I will tell you, having lived in LA, when you visit or you go to live somewhere else and it's a much smaller town, it's probably a good thing. But the news is not that exciting. Not like it is in the big city or is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And the newspaper coverage we found on Stephanie Albright mentions two disturbing cases in particular she'd worked on. She worked on the Dora Kent case, which involved the Alcor Cryonics Laboratory, where a terminally ill patient's head had been surgically removed and frozen after death.
Right.
And there was this question of whether that removal constituted a homicide. that became like a genuine legal and forensic crisis in Riverside County.
Yeah.
It's a pretty freaky case there.
And rumored to have happened to Walt Disney, although I think he could afford the whole body cryonics.
Yeah.
there.
Why
But some people figure, like, I can't, I don't want to spend that much, but just do the head.
Yeah.
And then it's like in Futurama, they just revive the head and you're just a head in a jar in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're, I guess, alive. So, but in any case, Stephanie Albright, she also worked the Bill Suff case, SUFF.
Yes.
This, sadly, was a serial killer operating across Riverside County from 1986 through 1992. There were 13 convictions, suspected in considerably more cases as well. And then the whole time, Bill Suff was showing up every day to his job as a stock clerk for Riverside County and delivering office supplies to the same buildings where people were actively trying to catch him. There's always some kind of mundane thing. It's like a lot of these folks, but that's how they go unnoticed. Nobody's like, oh, it couldn't be that guy. We didn't even think about it. Same thing like with the BTK killer, Dennis Raidman. He's, just, I think he was a deacon for the church.
Yeah.
Dennis Rader, that's right.
Yeah.
Something very mundane about it. Well, Suff's mundaneness was he won a prize at a county chili cook-off during this period. And there's always some dark rumor attached to that detail that was never forensically proven. But given what investigators eventually found in his apartment, it's the kind of rumor that just doesn't go away. He was finally caught on a routine traffic stop. Also something pretty mundane, just an illegal U-turn. And after 5 years of being secretly a murderer, just all ended by a bad traffic decision in a U-turn. And I hope the chili was just normal chili. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, it's a horrifying story. And also probably not all that satisfying to have caught the guy because he, ran a light or did a U-turn instead of through investigation,
No, that's
it's
usually
good to stop it, but
right.
It must be if you've been years of investigation and it's like, you're deep into it and then they call and be like, oh, we got him. He made a U-turn and we found some stuff in his car.
No, that's
it's like, oh, great. All right. That's the last 5 years of my life.
It's like it reminds you of Burt Reynolds in Sharky's Machine where he's so focused on getting this contract killer. He's like, I'm not going to let him be taken out by a traffic cop.
Yeah.
He wanted to get him. And so, but the idea is that, it's usually something like that. They trip up. It's something small, but thank goodness they were caught.
The reason we're going into all this detail is because it's a little bit of background on Stephanie Albright, who is connected to Gloria's case.
That's right. Yeah.
Just to point out that she was dealing with a significant emotional burden investigating these cases like Suff's. But the Gloria Ramirez investigation was going to be the last case she worked because it was nationally publicized, which when that happens, everyone involved in it comes under a ton of institutional pressure. And this is speculative on my part, but it's probably not just from the hospital where it happened, but local politicians, police, maybe even the governor. People want stuff like this wrapped up. It's like, what happened? Who was at fault? Was anyone at fault? Let's go ahead and say no. Can we move on from this kind of thing?
That's right. Everybody wants to move on, and everybody wants answers and some closure for their personal reasons. And this is no different. And you're right, this is connected because all of these characters in this story may factor into what was or was not discovered. And 1 month into Gloria Ramirez's death investigation, Stephanie Albright, the coroner investigator, 40 years old, tragically took her own life with a firearm at her home.
Yeah. She left behind 3 daughters and her husband. The San Bernardino County coroners were actually brought in to perform her autopsy to spare her Riverside colleagues from having to examine one of their own. Coroner Scotty Hill stated publicly that her death would not impede the ongoing Ramirez investigation, but investigators also acknowledged on record that the pressures of the case may have played a role in what happened to her.
Right.
Dan Cupido, or Cupido, I'm not sure how you say his last name, spelled like Cupid with an O on the end, the chief deputy coroner we mentioned earlier, who had reversed his declaration that Gloria did not die of natural causes, was asked directly whether the Ramirez investigation contributed to Stephanie Albright's death. And his answer was, quote, how much that affected what happened is too early to tell, end quote.
Yeah, I know it's a non-answer, but it's also a way of I think being fair and objective. It's like, we just don't know yet.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, we're going to move on from this because even if that is the case, that's going to be a personal or a family matter.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where the record leaves it there. So after Gloria's death, the Riverside coroner's office actually had wound up holding her body for 10 weeks, which is an issue that's going to come up again. Now, her family wanted it released for burial and for their own independent autopsy that they'd been wanting to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't released until April 20th, 1994. And by the time the family's independent pathologist could finally examine her remains, the body was decomposed, far enough along that any chemical compounds that might have been detectable in the days immediately following her death were gone.
Right.
Which this reminds me of what happened in the lead mask case that we just covered a few weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Except that the lead masks case was a post-military coup era in Brazil in the late 1960s. So keep in mind, this is not Riverside, California in the 90s.
Yeah, valid point. It shouldn't have happened.
I see what that's what I thought of immediately too, is this that, well, that's unfortunate here to get answers.
Yeah.
They held the body for 10 weeks and then released it in a condition that made a proper independent examination pretty much functionally impossible, which, and again, just an observation here, not an allegation, but one could see where that might feel like, some kind of cover-up or deliberate attempt to give evidence of wrongdoing, time to become harder to detect. So, like I said, it could just be an accidental oversight or intentional.
Yeah. I mean, it could also just be general bureaucratic red tape.
Yeah, exactly.
Accidental negligence. Who knows? It's hard for us to say because we don't have a lot of insight into that, but the Ramirez family probably does. Honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. In either way, they don't have what they need to get the answers they are deserving of.
Right. And so as if all of this isn't enough, it gets worse for them, which is tragic. It's like, how much more can go wrong here? The independent exam found that several of Gloria's organs had been cross-contaminated during the official autopsy process, and her heart was missing, not misplaced, not awaiting return, missing, apparently. The family's attorney argued that this was a deliberate obstruction and that whoever had the most access to the evidence had used that access to ensure that a competing investigation wouldn't be able to get any traction.
Maybe so. You have a missing heart from a body that was in official custody for 2.5 months.
Right. Now let's rewind a little bit to our notebooks. Remember some of the details we set aside at the top of tonight's episode. The lawsuit that the Ramirez family filed against Riverside County carried 2 charges. Like we said, the first, the doctors failed to treat her correctly on the night she died. And the second, that back in 91, when she'd been in there, they failed to notify her that a pap smear indicated she was developing cancer. An allegation, not a proven fact, but one that, if it has merit, means that there was a window 3 years earlier when the disease was still possibly in early development, and nobody opened that window. By the time she was brought into the ER on February 19th in 94, she was terminal. And Riverside General Hospital, the same institution that may have contributed to getting her there, held her body for 10 weeks and then returned it without her heart. So,
well, now cut to March 25th, 1998. Riverside County agrees to pay $350,000 to settle the lawsuit. And the county does not admit any wrongdoing. Their attorney, Peter Ozanoff, as we stated earlier, in the opening quote tonight, that the county agreed to settle in part to avoid, and again, these are his words, quote, stirring up allegations about safety hazards at the hospital, close quote. That's the posture 4 years later.
Right.
And just personally, I think that's some legal eagles out there in our audience. I think that's a no contest plea because I offered one during a traffic ticket that I went to court for just to see if the officer would show up. And he did, that old trick, like they have to take time off and get overtime. But he showed up. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm not arguing this. I'm just going to plead no contest. So what that means is that I'm not admitting fault. I'll just agree to accept the fine.
Well, I mean, if it works. I mean, the other trick I know that some lawyers use was to just keep doing continuances till the cop doesn't show up, and then then
it wasn't
off the hook.
Fine, okay. Look, we both took time out of our day. Getting back to this, the Los Angeles Times, in their coverage of that 1998 settlement, again, I read that. I was following anything I could from the Times. They described the source of the fumes that sickened those 23 people as, and I'm going to use their precise language here, never determined, not probably explained by this or that, not likely caused by whatever, never determined. And again, I remember I was talking about my frustration. It's like, what? There's no answers? Like, oh, come on. Like, I'm really glued to the paper here. Nothing. That's it. It's a mainstream newspaper. Okay. So 4 years after this event, I was excited to see a follow-up. But that pretty much summarizes what the official investigation actually produced. That never determined. That's it.
Yeah. Something just does not feel right.
Yeah, I had that sense when I was reading. Like, it's 1994, 92, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not 1894. Okay, so and I expect answers. But looking back, what we've just talked about, we've got the timeline now, right? We got the room, the people it took down, the autopsies in hazmat suits. You got a body, 10 weeks in official custody, and then you have a missing heart, like Pierce Beth Shelley. Then you have a $350,000 settlement.
Yeah. So the thing we haven't touched on yet is the why. There's a scientific explanation out there that a lot of people have probably heard about and may even think it's mystery solved. Yeah. But you know what we say about mystery solved at Astonishing Legends? Very, very rarely is that true.
Oh, it's not true. I see. Okay.
No. Yeah. Okay, it's not true. It's much more. Can we please stop talking about this mystery? Because what happened is either ugly or shouldn't have happened, and you're never going to find out.
Yeah, that's look, I understand you're never going to find out, so stop talking about it. But also, it's like, this is weird. We don't have answers. Let's move on, because that's human nature. But in this case, the proposed solution comes from one of the most credentialed research institutions in the country. And it's probably the closest thing this case is going to have to getting an official answer. And it's pretty detailed. It involves a lot of chemistry, or some, and you have to understand what the chemistry is. It is worth understanding, or trying to, well, anyway, it almost works. I'll say that about I appreciated it, but I also, and this is the weird way in which it is, I was watching Jeffrey Kripal, and it's like his world of research is not in answers. He's more interested in questions, because with answers, that's where it stops. Yeah. The questions keep us thinking and about it, and the mystery and the wonder going, and leading to more answers that could help people in the future. So yeah, it almost works. And like I said, you follow along, but I think you've got some juicy bullet points here coming up that will put some doubt. And again, embrace the doubt, embrace the question.
Yes. Indeed.
So after the break, we're going to talk about all that. We're going to walk through the full chemical chain. We're going to examine it piece by piece.
I did have to take 3 chemistry classes to get through the next part.
Like I said, I do wish I had Doc Hoggs on our chiming in here about it, because
I know.
I've asked him about other weird stuff, and he's got great answers. Anyway, he's a good teacher in that way. He can explain and simplify stuff. But we're going to take all that, wrap it up, and then get into the theories that occupy the space the chemistry doesn't quite reach.
Well, Miss Ramirez's story has so many twists and turns. It's not the cut and dried case people thought it was, I don't think.
No, not at all. Well, let's take a brief break here to talk about one of our sponsors tonight.
Yeah, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, as many have been before, and we're grateful to have them as sponsors, especially this month.
Yeah, that's right, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and this year the theme is With You, with the idea being, whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone.
Yeah, and that hits a little different this year. Most of our listeners know that you and I both lost a parent within 7 days of each other just this past October.
Yeah, and even though we saw some of that coming, it was still a shock. And the fact that we both experienced that so close together is the kind of coincidence, if it is one, that nobody wants.
Yeah, and the grief that comes with that, or the loss of anyone, is complicated. Some nights, for example, for me, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And some nights are, honestly, even in the middle of the day, I'm walking the dog or something, a long ago memory opens the floodgates.
Yep. As Joan Didion said, grief comes in waves, paroxysms, and sudden apprehensions that can weaken the knees and blind the eyes, obliterating the normalcy of daily life. Because, grief is on its own schedule. And the newsflash is you have no idea what that schedule is. And folks, if any of that is landing for you tonight, those feelings are a lot more common than you think. And you don't have to figure them out alone.
And BetterHelp does the matching work for you. You fill out a short questionnaire about what you're looking for. And with 12 plus years of experience, they typically get it right the first time. If the match isn't clicking, you can switch to a different therapist at any time.
And these are real therapists. BetterHelp therapists work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the U.S.
With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally. And it works. With an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews.
You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have someone with you in therapy.
Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/astonishing.
That's better, HELP.com/astonishing.
I'll tell you what, man, my wallet is feeling a lot emptier these days.
Yeah, you and me both, brother. I've been thinking about something lately, how a dollar just doesn't seem to go as far as it used to. Because, there's groceries, gas, the everyday stuff that doesn't go away. It all just costs more. And we're all looking around for places to claw a little of that back.
Yeah, that's a definite thing right now. And one place we stopped overpaying a long time ago is with wireless, with Mint Mobile.
Yep, because both of us have been with Mint for years now. And the thing about Mint, it exists purely to fix the way the big carriers operate, which I really appreciate. The crazy high bills, the bogus fees, those free perks that somehow cost you more in the long run. Mint Mobile's here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month.
All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And I'll tell you, the service has always been excellent, but it just keeps getting better. Mm-hmm. I've been noticing solid coverage in more and more remote spots. It seems like it's getting better every year, actually.
Yeah, it's been great, without fail for me anyway. And, you can bring your own phone and number, activate with eSIM in minutes, and start saving immediately. There's no long-term contracts. No hassle.
Yeah. You know what? I love eSIM. It's so great not to have to mess with finding a paper clip to pop your SIM card out and all that messes.
That's right.
Anyway, if you like money, people, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month.
New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available.
Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hi there, I'm Kaya from Adelaide, Australia. And when I'm not chasing shadow people or trying to find the truth out about the Somerton Man, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends.
Okay, so where were we here?
Well, we've been sitting in an emergency room full of questions and no answers from this investigation. But there is a theory on the table, one that comes to us from a federally funded national security science institution. And Scott, I love it when institutions get involved in the unexplained because people are looking for a common sense. Let's have a rational voice in this, shall we? And in this case, we have a government institution weighing in on a private institution, which would be Riverside General Hospital.
Yeah, that's right. And the government institution in this case is the illustrious Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which this is the kind of place that works on weapon systems, nuclear deterrence, cutting-edge forensic analysis for the U.S. government, which is why it makes sense to bring them in on this mysterious case. It's adjacent, by the way, to the types of facilities we were talking about in our episode about the missing scientists. As far as I know, as of right now, I know there's been some more people added to that list, and I use the term list in air quotes. I do anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's gone missing from Lawrence Livermore, but I think it's loosely connected to Los Alamos, I believe.
Oh, yeah. No, they're all, talk about connected. Okay, that was the other thing about, because how it figures in here is that you have oversight or you have people weighing in. It's, I think the nickname for the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is described as the smartest square mile on Earth.
Ooh.
Because you had a lot of brain power there developing the most...
number one on the bomb target list then.
Well, yeah, it goes without saying.
That's how the Research Triangle Park here is in North Carolina. I was always told that we were going to be toast because that's where there's a lot of brains in the Research Triangle Park.
Yeah, of course you're going to go after that as a viable target. But how it's connected, well, the other thing I was thinking about when you're talking about missing people, which I think that as of yesterday, the list had gone up to 17. Okay.
Yeah.
But again, in my view, it's like, okay, how many is too many? What number are we going to hit where people are like, oh, okay, now it's ridiculous. Now something's not making sense. So, and maybe it's all unconnected, but what do we always say on the show? Everything is connected. It's just the matter of degrees.
Right.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say, 12 or more years ago, that's when a lot of those strange floating craft were seen in that vicinity. Do you remember the photos of people taking pictures of things near telephone poles? There was one that was kind of famous. And what did it look like? It looked like the squid thing from
the little corkscrewy thing. Right. Yeah.
The flying squid
upside
machine.
down clown pants, I think is what Rob called it.
Right. It's just so
jellyfish.
Yeah, right. So that's famously now known as the jellyfish.
Yeah. I prefer upside down clown pants, but yeah.
Upside down pants.
Rob has a gift for that.
Yeah, of course. Well, he's takes it tongue in cheek, which he should. But it's the upside down clown pants jellyfish might wear. But it's all being done in a very beautiful area. I've driven by it. Have you?
No, I don't think I have. I don't think I've ever.
It's what we used to call in the car commercial biz as running footage area. So rolling hills.
I edited a ton of running footage, so I've probably seen it on film. Yeah. But I've never been to this part of California.
Right. It's a little more than an hour driving east of San Francisco. Just gorgeous area. And it's like, of course you're going to want a nice place to draw the smartest brains.
Yes.
The main site of the lab headquarters, it's about a 1 square mile campus. And it's just on the edge of the city of Livermore, California, on the eastern edge. So there's 2 locations. There's a main site called Site 200, and then there's a Site 300, which is about 7,000 acres, and that's experimental test site in the hills there. It's about 15 miles away from the main site for high explosive testing, and then that's more close to the town of Tracy. So what we're talking about is these folks will probably know about very strange toxic chemicals and compounds and maybe have an insight of what's going on. And so here at their Forensic Science Center, and this is led at the time by researchers Pat Grant and Brian Andresen, they were brought in to find a chemical explanation for what happened in the ER that night. Now, the California Department of Health had already weighed in with their own conclusion, and, that's one of the pat explanations we've encountered over the years for the unexplained that, frankly, we have a little problem with.
Yeah, it's the swamp gas of psychological solutions to something no one can figure out.
Right. Okay. And again, this was the California Department of Health's assessment. You would think that they know what they're doing, and, no shade on them, but I would expect a little more thoughtfulness about this, and maybe they just had no answers because their staff's symptoms here at the hospital, they thought were the result of mass sociogenic illness.
That's a new label for what was formerly known as mass hysteria, which in addition to not being a thing in our opinion, is a sexist term.
Well, we've certainly talked a lot about what we think about that. And it is the swamp gas and sandhill crane clown pants wearing bird of explanations, all floating from a weather balloon shooting flares. Just throwing all of them. This is kind of the same. I'm being flip, of course, but this is what we would say is the blanket to throw over this so people forget about it. But talking about mass sociogenic illness, formerly known as mass hysteria, is described as stress-induced psychological contagion. Now, to their credit, in our opinion, as cursory researchers, Livermore Lab rejected that outright because the medical pathologies that happened to the other victims in the ER, remember the hepatitis, the pancreatitis, the bone death in Dr. Gorchinsky's knees, and the necrosis, those aren't psychosomatic. You can't think your way into avascular necrosis, right? So, yes, you can have definitely physical ailments that are triggered or manifested by thought alone, which shows you how powerful your brains are when it comes to thought manifesting real-world conditions. So Livermore started from scratch, okay, and I respect them for that. And they built up something totally new from the chemistry starting upward.
Chemistry. I didn't know there was going to be chemistry.
Science.
I think I'm going to go ahead and go to bed. I don't think we should be.
No, it's time to get Thomas Dolby on all this, man. Embrace the weird science here.
Indeed.
But I will say, having gone through this, it's one of those things where the more you understand it, the more impressive it is. And the more you sit with it, then the more questions you have.
That's exactly it. So here's the chain, as we understand it. Livermore Lab's hypothesis begins with a common industrial solvent called dimethyl sulfoxide. DMSO. Now, it's used in everything from industrial cleaning to pharmaceutical research, but it also has a long history as a folk remedy.
That's right.
People apply it topically directly to the skin for pain relief.
Yeah.
It absorbs transdermally, meaning straight through the skin, into the bloodstream, and it actually works for some applications. Livermore Labs' theory was that Gloria was using it to manage her cancer pain. And I tell you, I hadn't heard of this stuff, Forrest, but it's on Amazon. Like right now, I was like, oh, look, I can go buy this and have it here tomorrow morning.
Oh, I think that's impressive. I have a jar of it right now.
Oh,
I was going to bring it to my recording hovel here, my hutch. But what's the point? We're on radio, okay? And no, the point is this jar is old, okay? It's my folks got it a long time ago to manage pain. And going even further back, it was around when I was in high school, because when I was on the wrestling team, I remember a good friend of mine, he wrestled unlimited. So big guy, lots of force going through, and he had some injuries, I think probably with his knee area. And he was using DMSO to manage the pain. Now, it wasn't a widely known thing, but it was kind of a newer type of treatment. But I always remembered, because we're going to talk about the actual odor it produces, because once you rub it on, transdermally, there is a scent and it comes out through your mouth. And often when he was in practice or we had a match, he would chew gum to kind of mitigate the smell. Now, as we're going to talk about here, because we have it in our notes here, it's a garlicky smell. I wouldn't exactly call it garlicky for someone who loves garlic like I do, but it is kind of slightly
pungent.
Yeah, but it's not real strong. But there is a scent of something that is biological, like garlic or herby, mixed with something slightly chemical. That's the best way I can put it. But it is easy to get. You can still get it. He claimed it always worked. I think with my folks, I didn't really ask them that much if they thought, was that effective. But it's around. And like I said, I got a jar of it right here, which is maybe 10 years old at least.
So normally, DMSO gets processed and excreted. Your kidneys handle it. But Gloria's kidneys weren't working. So the theory was the DMSO accumulates, building to concentrations her body can't process. Now, DMSO breaks down into several compounds simultaneously. One of them, dimethyl sulfide, produces the garlic smell that Forrest was just talking about.
Yeah, generally you could say garlicky, but what we're talking about here is something slightly sulfurous, right? Which, garlic and eggs, things that produce a sulfurous kind of smell. And that matches pretty close, or maybe exactly, to what the ER staff reported coming from her mouth when she arrived.
Right. And separately, when the paramedics administered supplemental oxygen in the ambulance, again, this is Livermore's theory, the oxygen oxidized the accumulated DMSO into dimethyl sulfone, or DMSO2. This was found in elevated levels in her blood and bile samples, and this is the single most important piece of physical evidence in the entire theory because it's directly measured.
Right.
It's there. What DMSO2 does is stay dissolved in the bloodstream at body temperature, 98.6. Completely stable and also completely harmless.
Until it cools down.
Until it cools down. The ER was running at approximately 64 degrees Fahrenheit. When Susan Kane drew that blood and moved the syringe away from Gloria's body back into the room with the cooler air, about 35 degrees cooler, the DMSO2 precipitates or crystallizes. And Livermore Labs confirmed this in the lab. They dissolved DMSO2 in something called Ringer's lactate.
Aha. Well, there's some real Sherlocking going on. Well, I'm sure you've heard of Ringer's lactate. You know where I first heard it?
I haven't.
You never heard it?
Where?
Come on. Didn't you watch Emergency 51 back when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was like 3.
No, you're only, listen, you're only 4 years younger than me. I'm sure it was on. It was very popular because it was exciting and it came on.
I did watch it, but I don't remember any chemistry.
Yeah, so what they did in the old days, the paramedics, anyway, they would call into the hospital, right, as they're en route and using a mobile telephone. And they would get the doctor's orders, like what to do to prep this person for transport to the hospital, get them started. And they would often say Ringer's lactate, and to get an IV started. So I also
Okay.
know it well, again, from having it administered to my dad when he was often dehydrated. So,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
basically what it is, so people know because it's a very common solution, and you may have folks out there may have even had it administered to them in an IV. What it is a
Yeah.
balanced isotonic crystalloid solution, and it's used primarily for fluid resuscitation or electrolyte replacement. Before
Okay.
coconut water got popular. So,
Right.
what
Okay.
it does, it closely mimics electrolyte composition that's found in human blood plasma. So it's got
Oh,
stuff like, yeah,
okay.
sodium chloride, salt, sodium lactate, potassium, calcium. And when people have significant blood loss or trauma or burn injuries, they'll use it. If you're
Right.
dehydrated, if you have
Yeah.
metabolic acidosis, where the lactates component, it's metabolized by the liver into bicarbonate. And so, or sepsis or even surgery. So, or even used to wash out wounds. So it's all purpose, but generally, it's a safe thing meant to resuscitate you.
Yeah, essentially, this is the standard IV solution you'll find in any emergency
Right.
room. So, Livermore cooled it from 98.6 to 64 degrees, and they got the exact
Hmm.
same kind of crystals, manila colored, yellow brown,
Right.
suspended in the solution. That replication that they did is the strongest experimental support that the theory has.
Yeah, I found that too, because the crystals in the syringe, the thing that stopped Dr. Gorczynski cold, have a direct chemical explanation in this chain here. So
Right.
this is kind of making sense so far.
It is. And this is where it escalates. Livermore theorizes that the electrical energy from the defibrillators, when they shocked Miss Ramirez in the Riverside General Emergency Room, not in the ambulance, but in the emergency room, that these provided the catalyst to convert the now crystallized DMSO2 into something else entirely, dimethyl sulfate, which is DMSO4.
Okay.
So this is the chain when we talk
Yeah.
about a chemical
Right,
chain.
right.
We're talking about the DMSO chain here.
Yes, we're increasing in numbers here. We're moving up the list from your plain old DMSO to DMSO2, and then now we're at DEFCON DMSO4.
Right. And those second two are not
No, they're
available
not.
on Amazon. DMSO4 is a different animal entirely. It's a highly volatile, highly toxic alkylating agent, meaning it chemically bonds to and damages biological tissue at the cellular level. So, by this theory, the vacuum inside the blood draw tube caused it to vaporize at room temperature. That gas, invisible and fast dispersing, is what Livermore Labs says poisoned the room. Now, the evidence they point to for its presence is what are called elevated sulfate anions, which were found in Gloria's blood. Sulfate anions are a naturally occurring compound in human blood, but Gloria's were elevated well above normal levels. Livermore Labs' argument is that those elevated levels are the chemical residue left behind after DMSO4 breaks down. So it's the footprint of a toxin that had already vanished by the time anyone thought to look for it.
Okay, now some might be asking or wondering, is this DMSO4 something like a chemical weapon or maybe a perfect type of something to go after somebody because it disappears so quickly?
Yeah, it's not exactly in the same category, apparently, but the toxicity level is in that neighborhood for sure. It's classified as a highly dangerous industrial chemical, the kind that requires full PPE in any legitimate lab setting. A small amount of exposure causes serious tissue damage, organ inflammation, neurological effects. It's not something that belongs anywhere near a hospital room anyway.
Right. And it reminds me a little bit of magic methyl. Now, I'd heard about that.
Oh, I went out with her in high school. Oh, no, sorry.
No,
that's
that was
somebody else.
anyway. No, I'm talking about very serious chemical compounds. And I remember again being back at UW. One of our friends was, I think he was working on an advanced chemistry degree, but there's a lot of lab work, and we were talking about just dangerous compounds you might have to work with in the lab there at the university. And he was talking about a guy, I think years before, that was under the flame hood or the splashback hood. This is what they figured out later, doing some deduction, is that he'd gotten one tiny drop of magic methyl on his shirt collar, and he was dead by the end of the day.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's not even on his skin.
Okay.
It was just it was that potent. So
Okay.
yeah, and basically in the scientific context, magic methyl it's one of two distinct things. There's medicinal chemistry, and because these methyl groups, they're small, they're simple, and it has a massive boost in performance over what's expected, meaning that you use it for experiments, which is what they were doing. But you have to be very cautious with it. It's also a chemical reagent, methyl fluoral sulfonate, and it's used by research chemists. So anyway, not to give anybody ideas here, but it's one of those things where if you could get a hold of it, perhaps like DMSO4, it's highly toxic. And since the 70s, there were a lot of fatal accidents with it. So it led to safer alternatives. So anyway, it's a very toxic chemical. But back to Gloria and the paper trail here, looking at this clinically, you have a dying woman with failing kidneys. There's supplemental oxygen being applied in a cool room. Then there's a defibrillator, and then there's a blood draw. There's 5 variables that independently don't mean anything on their own. But in sequence, Livermore Lab says they produced an invisible toxic gas that put all these folks in the hospital.
I concur, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you.
Well,
some of them
this
were already in the hospital working there, yes. But
Yeah.
the point is that it affected everybody nearby. So this is either some kind of forensic breakthrough or the most elaborate circumstantial argument in the history of emergency medicine. But that philosophical concept here ties into everything that we're talking about here. Is this just circumstance, coincidence, all coming together that on its own would not be believable? But we know something happened to her that is unexplainable.
I think when you look at the big picture of things, this is definitely the most impressive and reasonable theory that there is. And I applaud Lawrence Livermore Labs. Like, they give 2 craps what I think, but it's like, I think this is pretty cool. And the experiments they did, reproducing, trying to get to the bottom of this, I think it all makes sense. But for me, it just doesn't hold.
Yeah.
First of all, DMSO4 was never detected, not in the air samples, not in the body bag, not in her tissue. Livermore Labs explains that away by pointing out that dimethyl sulfate is environmentally non-persistent, rapidly breaks down, okay, but you can't confirm the presence of a substance solely by explaining why you couldn't find it.
That's right. And I think Livermore Labs will really appreciate your 5-star Yelp review. But again, this is something we've encountered before. You have a chain of custody problem or issue here that we never seem to be able to determine if this is some kind of negligence, which happens in these large settings and in kind of
a lot of people involved.
Yeah. And
somebody makes a mistake.
There's a lot of moving parts here. Things can happen, especially in a big organization like that. There's a lot of people who just through lack of communication, it ends up being negligent in some way. Or is this a purposeful cover-up? Because the syringe with the crystalline blood, the one piece of physical evidence that could have been directly analyzed for any kind of chemical composition, was reportedly thrown away accidentally.
Right.
Now, in different contexts, because again, this is from my point of view, in different contexts, these kind of mean different things. I remember when NASA said they accidentally taped over some of the Apollo moon landing footage.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. With Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, he taped over with the Golden Girls. It's like, how is that not locked up? So, we reuse the tapes over and over again. Like, yeah, but those tapes, come on. And so, but it's possible. I get that. Accidents happen. Or was there something on those tapes they didn't want you to see? As in this case, was there something in the syringe they didn't want people to find out about? I don't know. But that syringe was the only object in this entire investigation that contained actual anomalous material from that night. Gone. But what I mean by anomalous is that, it's not something that even people at Livermore Labs are having trouble figuring out. Okay. So it's not obvious. Right. It is anomalous. But losing the syringe, it's not kind of in the same vein as the Somerton man widow burning down her investigator husband's shed. Remember that? Where he had collected decades of work on the case, and she just got tired of seeing it. And
When also he had passed away. I did look that up. I think last time you thought it was a divorce. It was not a divorce. No. It was that he had died, and she was like, I'm done with all this Somerton crap. Yes. And she set it on fire in the backyard. Yeah. So coming back to the DMSO situation and the fact that you've got some right now for us, I guess, but here's the thing. There was no DMSO containers found at Gloria's residence.
That's right.
Now, and mind you, this is not an illegal substance either.
No.
There's no reason for them to hide it if they had it.
Right.
Like we said.
Right. It's not medical marijuana, which back at that time
it's
was
on Amazon.
Not,
yeah,
you can order it. And so, but who knows what's going on at her house? And that's what I'm saying. But yeah, you can get it at Amazon. Or in 1994, as I was saying, my high school days were earlier than that, but it was available at the drugstore. More so, you would find it, I think, at like where my folks got it at, one of those supplement vitamin stores, right? Maybe not at your big chain stores, but they do have it, I think, now. But Gloria's family denied she ever had used the substance. They never saw her with it. The elevated DMSO2 in her blood is real, and that is documented. And DMSO2 is a breakdown product of DMSO. And if there's no DMSO at the source, the chemical chain then logically has no starting point, right? So how does it get there? And Livermore Labs never resolved that issue. The foundation of their entire hypothesis is an assumed behavior, one that Gloria Ramirez was self-medicating with a chemical compound sold as a topical pain remedy, and is pretty popular. But remember, the people who knew her best, her friends and family, say that never happened. They never saw it.
Right. So the first step here in this, not only this chemical chain, but chain of events, is that there's basically no proof of, circumstantially or otherwise. Right. And the symptom profile doesn't really line up either. Industrial exposure to dimethyl sulfate apparently typically produces symptoms over hours, not minutes. The ER staff collapsed almost instantly, and the very first and most consistent symptom of DMSO4 poisoning is severe eye tearing, like being hit with tear gas. Not one staff member reported that. Nausea, which was widely reported, isn't a typical DMSO4 exposure symptom either. The theory does explain the crystals in the syringe from the blood draw pretty well, and the elevated sulfate anion levels partially. It also explains the long-term pathologies in Dr. Korchinski circumstantially, the hepatitis, the pancreatitis, the avascular necrosis. But the way people actually got sick in the room doesn't match at all how DMSO4 poisoning is supposed to work.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. This is Amelia Cotter. Now back to the show.
All right. Now, are we ready for theory time?
Yeah.
And before we start into that, this is one of those cases where official explanations get as weird and twisted and backbendy and reaching as much as the fringe ones. And I always love that. You know me, Scott, I love the point where the rational official explanations get even more woo than the woo explanations.
And here comes a very tangential and weird movie reference for tonight's episode. I always think of
Bring it.
Young Guns.
Yes.
And when they're all on the run and Emilio Estevez playing Billy the Kid, a very charismatic Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
And like everyone else has decided they don't like him because he's so crazy and reckless. And they're on the run and they're like hanging out in these bushes trying to figure out where to go next. And nobody likes his plan to go back. And so somebody pitches, let's go to Mexico. Yeah. We'll run down to Mexico. And he makes all this whole list of all the reasons they'll be killed in Mexico and how it's a horrible idea. And then he's like, I'm in. And that's kind of what's happening here. It's like, you're getting in. I'm in on this one. It doesn't make sense, but I'm in.
Right.
And like I said, the DMSO4 thing, it's like, why would the family be hiding that? Maybe if they were trying to avoid any kind of culpability for what happened to her.
Just stop you right there. Possibly because they don't want to make it seem like, again, this is not disparaging to anyone in any way, but like if you're trying to foment some kind of lawsuit, you want less culpability with the responsible parties. It's like, you don't have to make it seem like, oh, well, you actually did that, and that's what caused this. Now, no fault of your own, but you did that.
I feel like an investigation of that, any like group of investigators worth their salt would be able to find receipts or proof that they had it in the house. I mean, I think they must have looked for it. When they said they didn't find it in the house, and granted, we didn't get a lot of details about that. I don't know if that was someone walking in and opening a medicine cabinet or if the house was like thoroughly like warrant style searched.
We don't know.
Which it seems with an investigation like this, you've had loss of life, that maybe it would have been a pretty intense search. because I don't think the family would have done the chemical math
Yeah.
to be like, oh, we got to get this out of here. We caused a DMSO4 chain,
No,
like,
and
they're not going to be doing that.
and
so.
honestly, I don't think personally that's the case either, where they're trying to hide that she was using it. You know what I'm saying? Because I think
Right. Why wouldn't they just be like, yeah, we use this, we use calamine, we use whatever to make her feel better.
Right,
Yeah,
because
just say
I think
right.
when you're a family that's experienced loss like that, you want answers, right? You want to know what happened, and you don't want it to be repeated again, either by someone in your family or anyone else. And that, that causes a weird reaction, because we often think we know everything about chemistry and science and all that. But there are things, chemical combinations that we're still unaware of, that because no one's paid or had a mind to study it in a lab for years.
Yeah. So let's rewind just a little bit. Again, as we just said a few minutes ago, California Department of Health is like, well, it's mass sociogenic illness, or back then they called it mass hysteria. And the two researchers that came up with that theory, by the way, both women, just so you know, I looked that up. That's not in our notes here, but they came up with the mass hysteria theory, which was a much more accepted theory. Even back when we started the show, it was more accepted than it is now, just in the past 12 years.
To be clear, though, there are cases when I think that is actually a real cause, but not to this extreme.
Right.
And we're not going to get real into that, but we talked a little bit about this with the Enfield horror, or the Enfield monster case. And I went off on a whole, I think I goaded you into doing a whole separate episode on sociogenic illness and, pros and cons, because it comes up so much in weird cases like this, because it can explain stuff. And so the laughing fits, the dancing plagues, the girls' school in Zimbabwe, I think, when people have a mass gas, they all get nauseous because there's a gas leak, they think. So, as we're saying, the brain is very powerful. It can cause real effects, but not to this degree. That's where it falls short for me.
If you believe in the idea of mass sociogenic illness and that it can occur in some situations, and I think there's components of it that can occur, yawning is contagious.
Yeah,
we're talking about yawning. Are you yawning right now? Oh, by the way, don't lick your lips. Those kinds of things. Oh, everybody. Oh, shoot, I got to yawn and lick my lips. But there are all the things were aligned for mass sociogenic illness in this scenario. It's a high stress environment. There's an unusual sensory trigger. Symptoms are spreading by line of sight. And wait for it, primarily female staff were affected. That is the case here. Again, that's how they frame it. Blood tests post-exposure came back normal. And again, remember, the paramedics who rode with her completely unaffected.
Yes. So remember all those elements there, which, again, doesn't completely fill out the equation here, right? And remember Dr. Gorczynski's issues. You can't contract that by standing near or just looking at someone else who's freaking out. That doesn't happen.
That's right. Bone death is not psychosomatic. And Dr. Gorczynski's knees, they didn't die because she was scared, and she and the other victims vehemently denied mass hysteria, as they called it at the time, being something that they experienced. And I would like to add that I would think folks that are in an ER every day are pretty hard to rattle in that category. It's not like a bunch of people that got dropped off on Mars and they're out of oxygen. These are people that are in this environment every day. So I would also think they're a little more resistant to that idea. But it feels to me like that diagnosis exists, honestly, because the California Health, they needed a name for something that they couldn't explain. But, it's hard to know for sure.
Now,
that's just my take.
As we were talking about before, is that, your brain and brains all near each other in a particular circumstance or setting can cause physical symptoms. And that term for that generally is called somatization. Or somatization. It's a psychological mechanism where some kind of distress, either emotional or mental, things like intense stress or fear, some kind of anxiety, then is expressed through real physical symptoms. So they manifest as real things.
Right, like diarrhea before you have to go on stage.
Well, it could be, like I said, you thought, I know you're joking, but the thing is that...
I am and I'm not. Having, married to somebody who is a comedy performer or whatever, I can tell you for a fact that the bathroom outside the Groundlings Theater stage is a very busy place.
Oh, yeah,
before a show's about to
exactly. And the thing is, I know, I can't remember who... Some performers still do this. Is it Nick Cannon or somebody? He admitted to. It's like, he's.
Oh, he throws up.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
like every time he says,
Yeah.
I can't help it. It's just
Yeah.
one of those things. Like
Yeah.
I've done this a million times. Literally, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not stressed at all. I know how this goes. I can do this in my sleep. But like that just triggers that reflex, and
Right.
that's
Right.
part of it. So there's several terms
Interesting.
within this. So somatization, that's the process where your body is actually turning this psychological distress into some of these symptoms, these sensations physically. There's psychosomatic, and that's an overall term which describes physical conditions that are made worse by some mental factors.
Sure.
There's SSD, which is somatic symptom disorder, and that's it's a clinical diagnosis when someone has an extreme, like a focus that's really distressing on them, on their physical symptoms that may not have a clear medical source or cause. You know what I'm saying? Like, something feels wrong, and then you start to really go down the
That's
rabbit
how my
hole.
great grandmother was.
Yeah, you start to obsess about it. I know people close to me that like something will happen, and then I guess it's a little bit like some kind of hypochondria, perhaps. But basically, no, you have a real thing going on. I have a stomach ache, like, oh my God, is that stomach cancer? And then you start to dwell on it, and it makes it much worse. And then you can actually make yourself even sicker. So that's some kind of really troubling focus on some kind of symptoms. But there's no clear medical cause that can be determined. And then there's psychogenic, which is a term or an idea that's applied to very specific things, like you have some kind of sensation of pain or even tremors, perhaps, that are starting in your brain, in the mind, as opposed to coming from some actual physical injury. So, we talk about mass psychogenic illness, is that you're displaying actual symptoms, but there's really no physical, solid, material purpose or cause of that injury. It's starting in the brain, and then you manifest actual symptoms. And certain things like the fight or flight response, as we know, that can trigger a lot of real physical symptoms, like your racing heart.
Can I tell you something? I have to interrupt you, really.
Oh.
I'm reading this list, these bulleted point notes that you're about to say, and I feel like they're all happening to me just because I'm reading them. Now I'm starting to freak out that I'm making this happen to me while we're just going through our script.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, wait, is my heart racing? My heart's racing. What's happening?
Really?
Just from
folks,
reading
I thought
about
Scott
this.
was going to be like, that's enough. You should really just wrap this up.
No.
But you should,
I'm looking at this list. I am not having gastrointestinal distress, I'm pleased to say, and I'm no
what's
tremors.
the joke is that, I can't remember what it's from, but basically somebody's describing to them, trying to gaslight them about like, do you have these symptoms? And then it's like, I guess I do.
Yeah. Can we get through this part? You're breaking me down.
No.
Here.
Is that these are all things like people that have panic attacks, like nothing's really, you're not being threatened at the moment, but something's triggered you. It's some kind of stress.
I've had one of those.
I can say for myself, I can understand how awful it is because I've never had it fully come on, but this is weird, but I could feel like if I let this feeling go, it will turn into that.
Yeah.
And
like
so I meditate I just like, okay, breathing, clear the mind. And I think those are some techniques, other than I know some other folks that have to pop a Xanax because it just comes on and it's horrible. It's really terrible because you do have things like uncontrollable shaking or shivering. You can get the cold sweats. You get a tightness in your chest or even body aches, severe headache. You can't breathe. You feel like you're being suffocated. Your heart's racing. These are all real things.
Yeah, it's all happening to me right now.
Okay, well, let's get back to the story in the hospital room.
Let's stop listing all the things that are.
Yeah, no, and then there's people, like I said, there's people like that. That's all you have to hear, or you see somebody doing that. And especially just imagine being in the ER. They see terrible things all the time, as we know.
That's right.
But when they see something like that, it's affecting more people. It could be like a snowball effect where it's like, okay, what's going on here? And the scary part is you have no idea what's going on. What's happening?
Right.
Is this nerve gas? Like, are we being attacked? What's happening? And it causes a little bit of panic. But getting back to, I guess, what's called the hospital negligence theory or hypothesis, the Ramirez family's own position, what they thought, they think it comes back to the building itself. because in 1991, a poisonous gas leaked from a sterilizer there, and 2 employees had to be hospitalized, I think, at the hospital, or they had to have treatment. And in 1993, sewer gas was discovered leaking directly into the emergency room.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it is
That's
not
good.
because, one, it hasn't. Yeah, I mean, look, I've been in plenty of ERs, and you smell all kinds of things, but that has a specific
Yeah.
smell, and it in large doses it can nauseate you, certainly. But no, the hospital was cited for that. But the family believed there was a similar leak of some kind. Like, could be from faulty equipment, improperly mixed cleaning agents. We know not to mix dishwashing detergent with ammonia, right? And different things. You're going to make mustard gas. So yeah, that's those things we know. And it's like these weird kind of combinations that happen. That could be part of it. And as I mentioned before, I just want to get this out of the way, is that there are things that happen that I personally heard about that are obviously chemical reactions, even with pharmaceuticals, that have not been studied. I remember one going to, it was a place like Supercuts or something, but I was getting my hair cut, and the gal did a great job. But she was talking about one client of hers that she had, graying hair, and it was mostly silver, gray silver hair. And then she came in at a next visit, and it was turning back to her original hair color. And it's like, okay.
Right.
And she asked her, like, well, what's going on? She says, well, the only thing I can think of is I started on this new medication. And it's turning my hair back to its original color from gray, which we all think is permanent, right? Unless you dye it. So right there is a chemical reaction with a pharmaceutical that could be worth billions. Imagine not having to dye your hair anymore. It goes back to the color you were born with. And but is anyone studying that? Well, no. And I asked her, like, what's the medication? She goes, I can't remember. And maybe it's just for her. But all kinds of reactions happen with different people with different chemicals. That's just the way they work, but they've not been studied. So to summarize that thought, what the family thought is that there's some weird combination of chemicals, like cleaning agents or something, that were improperly mixed, and that might have poisoned Gloria and the staff.
HAZMAT teams evaluated the plumbing, ventilation, and the equipment immediately after the incident, and they found nothing. But HAZMAT arrived after the event. Whatever was there, if anything, may have had time to disperse.
Yep, that's the enemy of an investigation is time passing, And then there's the settlement. So a county that pays $350,000 to avoid stirring up safety hazard allegations hasn't really cleared itself of anything. It just made the questions go away. So that, to me, that's like the no contest defense plea, right? It's like, I'm not admitting fault, but we'll just pay the fine.
Yes.
Okay, now, here's the thing, getting on to our theories here. This is something I'm going to ask you if you remember, because I certainly do. And again, as I said at the beginning of the show, I was always had the radar up and the antenna up, looking for any more new news. And we've mentioned this theory on the show before, I'm pretty sure. And I can't remember what case we're talking about. Again, maybe this is back then, but I remember reading about it too at the time in LA.
Yes. Yeah.
So in 1997, there was an alternative newspaper called the New Times LA. You remember them?
I do, actually.
I don't think they're still around, but...
No, they're not. They're not. I looked when we were researching this, I saw that they were no longer.
They were fun. They
got bought up. But
they get folded in.
They were larger company that owns them is around, but that particular paper is not.
Yeah, they were a great alternative. The other one was the LA Weekly. And so if you're in New York, was it Time Out New York?
Yes, exactly. Same kind of vibe.
But I really appreciate and enjoy that kind of journalism too, just because it's an alternative. And the New Times LA proposed something that was much darker, you could say, for explanations. That the members of the hospital staff were using the facility to smuggle methylamine, methylamine, which is a precursor chemical for manufacturing methamphetamine. And they did it by hiding this chemical reagent here inside standard IV bags. Now, consider that for a second.
Yeah.
The most direct way to test this theory, right, would be checking what was actually in the bags administered to Gloria that night. But apparently that was never done. Or if it was, nobody could find any record of it.
Methylamine is familiar to me, and it's not because of Magic Methyl that I used to go out with. But nobody dated more than once, apparently. But methylamine, I seem to be familiar with that word because, again, We were talking earlier in one of our spots
Yes.
about Breaking Bad. Was there
Uh-huh.
not like a bunch of Breaking Bad centered around this particular
Yes, exactly.
this chemical?
Many
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
episode of Breaking Bad was about how to get more methylamine. So
Right.
yeah, what a
Right.
great show, by the way. But that was
Yeah.
a very interesting storyline in that. Remember, they think they robbed a train, and I apologize for the spoilers, Scott. But I think if you're going to watch it, you would have watched it already. If you haven't seen Breaking Bad, you're not going to. So I have no
Yes.
problem.
But this
about
is a
talking about it.
spoiler alert coming
Yeah,
up.
sort
so-
of. Yeah, in a sense, because that is one of the precursors. And how do you get it? Well, you have to get it, shipped from China or some other overseas source, or you have to make it. But it's all carefully monitored because of the meth connection here. So, what does methylamine have as a property here? Well, it has a strong, fishy kind of ammonia odor that is often, as it was compared in the show Breaking Bad, it smells like cat urine.
Right.
So that's a couple of things. Oh, now that I think about it, tied to our earlier spots or spots
Yeah.
you will hear
the commercials
within.
tonight are really integrated. Yeah.
That's a coincidence, or is
Yeah.
it? Does it mean anything? Probably not. Other than it all kind of ties in. So it's all kind of connected in that, there's a very distinct odor. And if you remember Jesse Pinkman, if you watch the show, he's played by Aaron Paul. He attacks the character Todd Alquist, played by the terrific Jesse Plemons, or they're both terrific, because they had to do some dastardly deed in the robbing and stealing of methylamine. And someone gets killed, and Jesse makes an off comment like, yeah, it is funny where it smells like cat urine. And like that triggers, like, that's enough. And so
Yeah, right.
a fight ensues. But yeah, it does have this really strange smell, kind of like a sharp, sour, kind of an overwhelming smell as too. And then, it's a key chemical in methamphetamine production. It does smell like cat pee, which is interesting here in my notes in that it's often cat pee, but in a particular location. If you've ever been to someone house and they have a cat and the cat pees in the basement or somewhere in the corridor, it's like, oh yeah, that has a
The
distinct.
pee turns to an ammonia smell after time. No matter, it happens here with Biscuit the cat.
Yeah.
If you don't get it out of the litter box in the next day or so, or when you dig it out from under the sand that we use,
right.
you smell ammonia every time.
Yeah,
It's an
exactly. And the
ammonia
reason
smell.
for that is that due to nitrogen-containing compounds, which are called amines, that are common with ammonia. And it's also, again, that's the connection. That's a real component of cat urine. And when officers go looking for a meth lab, that's what they smell for. They look for that. They smell for that because it's a warning sign. So, yeah, you remember when Walt and Jesse, they suit up in hazmat suits? Well, methylamine, it's a big part of why that's necessary. It's toxic. It smells like some form of cat urine or ammonia. And that's the same thing Susan Cain reported coming from that syringe. So the theory holds that one of those tainted IV bags was accidentally administered to Gloria. And this is all coming back to me as we go over this again. Is that that's a theory that it caused her rapid deterioration and then the toxic exposure of the staff. So it was people doing bad things, and that got out of hand and crossed over, which you have to kind of figure if you're a smart person that that's not a good way to do that. But if it did work, it worked.
Yeah.
But Riverside County, again, you have to consider this, was at the time one of the largest meth distribution centers in the United States.
Right.
At that time, authorities had shut down more than 1,000 meth labs in the county since 1988. If you remember, is it the 909? It's the desert, the Imperial Valley here.
Yeah.
Imperial County. Like it's deserty. There's not a lot of people out there. There's people there that don't want to be found.
Yeah.
Same thing with Mojave, and they're doing all kinds of nefarious things out there. And then you get back to Livermore Labs, and some of the findings they had, if you remember, were the organs of her system, Gloria's, that fed into this theory.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to say there. First, one was I was curious, after we uncovered that this, the Inland Empire was the home of meth during this time. You know what apparently is the current center of meth. At least this is what an AI search told me 3
Greensboro,
days ago
High
when we were
Point.
working on this. No, not where I live.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Phoenix.
Oh,
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Which I was kind of surprised. Like, it's
It's got that
I was
deserty
surprised.
connection. Yeah.
Anyway, also, by the way, I mean, I know that addicts and I guess maybe even dealers make some dumb decisions or try to get away with stuff, but
That's true.
I can't think of anything stupider than putting this chemical in IV bags in a hospital. The chances of an accident would seem abnormally high. In terms of like your business, trying to run your business, this seems like the stupidest way, which makes me think, no, I just don't think this happened. I just don't.
Yeah, it was far-fetched at the time. Now, again, if it was a different scenario, I could see this because it is a kind of a clever way. You've already got chemicals and pharmaceuticals running through a hospital, right?
Right.
And back then, it's a little different. So as you probably noticed nowadays with elder care, it's like everything is locked up in a cabinet. You got to punch in a code because at that time, and I worked on videos about this, like there was a lot of pharmaceutical mix-ups that can happen. Wrong dosages, wrong medications.
Right.
You're supposed to keep track of it. And the DEA and other organizations would come in to check, and you would spot surprise checks to make sure you're following rules. But that's
like
not a free-for-all
inspectors.
Wild West kind of a thing, right? It's like, oh, we don't know where anything is. But they would have to, because also, as you know, like I've witnessed, there's so much disposable stuff nowadays, like these plastic bags, and it goes in the trash, and there's heaps of trash going out. So you grab these bags and you're doing that at the hospital.
Yeah.
It's a little too risky, I would think. But I can see somebody stealing the bags to use them off site. Maybe.
But also, like, welcome to the ER. We're sorry that you're, having the worst day of your life. Here's a bag full of stuff that's definitely going to kill you immediately. Just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, when Livermore, I guess when they examined Gloria's organs, they found something unrelated to the DMSO chain entirely, and that was abnormally elevated levels of nicotinamide. That's not nicotine, despite the similar name. It's a form of vitamin B3, and it was at concentrations high enough to raise some eyebrows. Now, nicotinamide is frequently used to cut illegal drugs because it's cheap, widely available, and it produces a mild warmth or flush sensation that can be mistaken for a drug effect. Now, in the context of the methylamine theory, its presence in her system became another data point that pointed towards something being in the IV bags that shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And we looked, and as of this recording, by the way, there is no case we could find in the United States of a hospital facility being used as an active meth smuggling operation at this scale or at any scale.
Right.
Really.
But a perfect opportunity then. Yeah, right. It's like nobody's thought of that.
But that cuts both ways because it makes the theory harder to accept, but it also means it's not something investigators had a framework for recognizing, even if that evidence had been in front of them. No meth or precursors were found in her blood, no illegal chemicals in the hospital inventory. So we're skeptical. But remember, that syringe is missing. The case was settled also, and we don't really know why. So maybe we're wrong. But the two pieces of evidence that could have answered this most directly, the syringe and the IV bags, either gone or apparently never tested. So
well, that's what fuels this mystery and others. Key pieces of evidence that seem to be would answer a lot of questions, but we just don't have them. Now, getting back to what we do have is the body, right? But not in the best condition here, but a body in the final stages of some kind of multi-organ failure. You do wonder, could that process, which could happen a lot of different ways, chemically speaking, where they're producing metabolic byproducts that science hasn't fully mapped. I'm always amazed at what the human body can do. And I think people in the medical and science fields will say that too.
Yeah.
So we looked into this a little bit, and the reality is we don't have a complete picture of what a human body actually generates chemically when multiple systems are failing simultaneously at that kind of level. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got a lot of chemistry going on in your body.
Yeah, and things are mixing together that maybe normally never mix, and then the temperatures are all over the place, all kinds of things are happening.
Well, another thing that we've not covered, and we've often talked about this since the beginning of the show, is something that was also a popular idea being bandied about in the mid-90s and early 90s times, human spontaneous combustion.
That's right.
Which is poo-pooed, but obviously there's some weird cases where it's like, okay, your chemistry in your body and the thermogenic effects that happen, could that actually light you on fire, depending on a lot of different factors? It doesn't happen to everybody, right?
Right.
It's very rare, but it seems to do happen. What's going on there? Well, it's like it's so freaky. Nobody's really studied it, at a university lab setting, but
Right.
something's going on there. And so what Livermore Lab did say about the DMSO does track for me a little bit. I can follow that.
Right.
Again, I like the, it's got a, definitely like a Sherlock, Agatha Christie kind of an angle to this where it's kind of complicated, but it starts to make sense. But do all the pieces fit? Okay, because the crystallization, replication in the lab, that's a real thing. The higher levels of sulfate, anion, that's a real thing. But the starting compound, the DMSO itself, was never found.
Right.
Now, what if the idea of DMSO chaining chemically into this deadly gas is right, but the origin of it is wrong? If you know what I'm saying here. It's like, okay, so she didn't apply it, but something's going on involving DMSO. What if Gloria's body, in that state of shutting down on every level, produced some kind of chemical precursor compound that kind of behaved like DMSO, but it wasn't actually DMSO? And where's Doc Coggs to weigh in on all this? Did you think of asking him? He's got great.
I should have.
No, our friend, Dr. Chris Cogswell, doctor of chemistry and chemicals, and also fun interpretations. I would love to hear his take on this. But that's the idea. Is like, what's going on here? In that it's just something unknown yet.
Yeah, that's a super interesting idea, man. And it's not something that occurred to me. I mean, and we, of course, lack the education to speculate on it. But speculate we shall.
Oh, of course.
That's what we do here. But if you look at the oily sheen, the garlic odor, the ammonia, the crystals, those aren't separate things. That's a coherent set of anomalies that all came from one body at one time. So something was happening inside Miss Ramirez's body that night that produced a chemically specific, physically observable, toxic event. So maybe we don't have a clean name for it. Livermore Labs took their best shot and built the most rational theory, and that's still not proven.
Yeah.
The institution with the best access to the evidence let the syringe disappear, held the body for like 8 or 10 weeks, returned it without a heart. Whatever the truth is, the evidence that was needed to figure it out was systematically compromised.
Okay, well, final thoughts here. As I was saying before, strange things do happen. As I said, spontaneous human combustion, I think, is dismissed or poo-pooed by a lot of the medical establishment, but I think there's enough there that something's going on, right? People do have known odd reactions to certain pharmaceuticals. I remember the story of this guy that it's kind of funny because I don't know if you've read about him or heard about him, Scott, but he's kind of a character in New York City who dresses up like a wizard. And I think I can't remember if he plays music for people or tells them stories while they're riding the subway. And people are like, hey, that's kind of fun. They throw him some bucks. But he had a medical condition and his doctor said, well, we could try this pharmaceutical here, this script. But I got to warn you, it's going to turn your hair completely white. And he was like, hey, I'm a wizard. That's perfect. So he's like, yeah, let me have it. He was on board. So he's got long white hair, long white beard. And but that's like a weird side effect. These things happen all the time. Just watch any commercial from one of your big pharma. It's like the long list of things that can happen to you for certain people. And everybody's different. And I've certainly done a lot of, pharmaceuticals, reading up on it to see what could affect what. And you get in these percentages like that's very rare, but it could happen even as small as 1% or 2% of the population. Well, maybe Gloria is in that 1 or 2% where something could happen that's totally unexpected, but possible. And again, like I said, that the mysterious chemical that turns your hair the other way back to its original color, that's a gold mine. If somebody figured that out and it could just be a pill, a lot of folks would take it. But would that interact with anything else? Well, we don't know. That's why there's years of lab studies before the FDA can approve it. But what we do know is Gloria Ramirez died of cancer. And the coroner's ruling it's accurate as far as that goes. But what happened in the ER that night in 1994 has really never adequately been explained. The closest thing to an official answer is a hypothesis built on a substance her family says she never used, that was never found in her home. And no one can dispute that because now she's gone.
Yeah. So there's two explanations out there when you start looking into this story. One requires believing that a topical pain remedy nobody found was turned into a toxic gas that behaved differently from every known exposure to that gas. The other one requires believing that a hospital emergency room in Riverside, California was being used as a meth smuggling operation, which, as we said, is something we could find no precedent for in the United States.
No, and
Yeah.
I don't believe any arrests were made, no investigations into that. That was just, I
Right.
don't know where that lead came from, but what I will say is what I alluded to earlier is that in other circumstances, that could happen. I mean, talk about Walter White. That could be something really way out there
Right.
that could happen. Because remember in the show, they're getting the chemicals they need through other companies and means, which were not like a food processing company
Right.
in Germany, right? It's like, yeah, because they deal with chemicals. Who can do that? And something unexpected happens, right? So there's a chain of custody, as we mentioned, that is totally unexpected and maybe not known to any investigators or the public. And so maybe it's hospital workers, not your healthcare providers, but lower level hospital workers involved. Are we talking about exposure accidentally to something else that nobody knew Gloria had come into contact with? I'm not talking about, I guess Dyatlov Pass. Was there some kind of chemical weapon that those hikers were exposed to that was so far out there? Well, you have the setup. We do know that the Russians, they do love to experiment with those kinds of things. Poisons and toxic agents are certainly on their shopping list. And but it was accidental. Those hikers weren't involved with the military. They were just folks out in the wrong place, wrong time. And something weird happened to their bodies, and it ended up in a weird circumstance that no one else really knows about because they weren't there. Or does somebody else know about this?
Right.
I'm not conspiratorial about this story. I don't think that there's something else going on, but I do think that there could be unseen factors and elements, reagents that she was exposed to that nobody knows about, and maybe not even Gloria at the time. You know what I'm saying? Like she touched something, she was near something earlier that combined with her condition
in a strange fluke
caused a really strange reaction.
Right.
The hospital may have missed her cancer diagnosis in 1991, but that doesn't explain what happened in the emergency room in 1994. That the coroner held on to this woman's body for 10 weeks, and then she came back, but missing her heart. Then an organization pays $350,000 4 years later to avoid having certain questions asked in public and potential fines and a lot of problems. And at some point, the accumulation of failures, like I said, a combination of things, misdiagnosis, the missing heart, a hush money settlement of sorts, it stops looking like bad luck, and then it starts looking like an institution maybe protecting itself, which they all do. That's
right.
Humans and individuals do that. We just don't know what any of this something else is. But Gloria's family may have a better idea than anyone, and we'll never know what they're thinking.
Yeah. What we do know for certain is that a 31-year-old woman, a mother of two, who'd been fighting for her life long before that night in February, was brought to a hospital in Riverside, California, and something happened that nobody has ever fully explained. The Los Angeles Times called it in 1998, and it's still true today. The source of the fumes was never determined. So far, this is definitely not a mystery solved. That's going to wrap up episode 330 of Astonishing Legends. This is the first of 3 new main episodes in a row. Always keep an ear out for our new episodes of the Dead Letter Office weekly on Tuesdays as well. If you join us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, you can hear all of this content early and commercial free. If that's not your thing, remember that all of our shows are free to listen to right here on our main feed. Help us out by telling your friends and family about us, and please remember to support our sponsors when you can.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound. Our co-producer is Tess Feifel, who also leads our research efforts and manages our social media. and we're grateful for the hard work of our technical producer, Ed Vicola, behind the scenes. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland, for lending his voice to our shows.
Hi, this is Amelia Cotter.
Galaxy-wide.
My name is spelled B-R-O-N.
C-I-A-R.
That's Amelia Cotter, C-O-T-T-E-R.
W-Y-N.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Carestia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design, and our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Many episodes have transcripts available. For ones that don't, you can request them by emailing transcripts@astonishinglegends.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to commercial-free versions of both the main show and the Dead Letter Office, as well as additional bonus content, including the Patreon-exclusive show, The Astonishing Junk Drawer. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.